Welcome back to Filmonomics is Slated. I'm Steph Paterno, and we jump back into our Filmonomics Talks segment, where we are exploring the financeability of originality. And one of the challenges is that original content may be very compelling to equity investors, and they get excited and want to participate, but it's also very hard to sell. Distributors are wary of originality and want to go for proven elements. Remember, distributors have made bets on risky original material before and gotten burned. So how do you find material that satisfies both sides of the spectrum? So with that question in mind, we go back to the Filmonomics Talks and hear from Kevin Ueshina and Daniel Bauer. And joining me is my partner, Jason Scoggins.
So I think it's just become much more complicated, right? So like, when you launched, K5 and when I was a fancy agent at CA, you'd call like 10 people in the United States and you get a yes or no, and then every territory there's maybe 5 or 6, and that's it, and then you're done, and okay, you move on. Now, I mean, there's probably upwards of 30 buyers in the United States that I have to deal with just in the U.S., and I'm dealing with Canada, which is now like completely carved out. And what gets complicated as a salesperson is historically I would just call Disney or Fox or an independent distributor like the Weinstein Company, and that was the call. But now I've got to convince the buyers like iTunes or Netflix or Walmart to get excited about the movie that I'm selling, so I can then call my distributor and say, you know what, Weinstein Company, Walmart will buy X number of videos and put on the end cap, or you know what, iTunes will promote this. If you do, or Netflix has this. Netflix is like the most important buyer in like the ecosystem right now. But what does Netflix think? That's the line.
So you're doing those positioning calls at the outset before you're talking to the buyers.
Sometimes, well, usually simultaneous, right? So it all happens at the same time because right now it's all about like hedging risk, right? So how do I hedge? How do I make sure that what I'm doing, I'm going to be able to recoup my money? So I have to do the work of the distributor and the distributor's distributor, right?
So you're basically trying to identify what the total consumer demand might be, so your buyer gets more excited.
It's nuts in terms of just how deep I have to go in terms of to actually get deals done, right? So if I want to get a all rights theatrical distributor deal done, I usually have to go to like the most infinitesimal buyer of that distributor, which is going to be some random digital platform. I don't know, Fandor likes it. I don't know. It's like very specific in terms of like how deep I have to go, and then I have to back up from there.
Wow, that's very interesting because Jason and I have been thinking about that for a long time with our scoring system and the entire financial model. We don't have access to the confidential deal terms that any given film has when they sell, but we do know what the total consumer demand is based on publicly reported figures. So what we're doing is arming producers with the information that they can use to go talk to the buyers and tell them, well, look, the total demand internationally for this in television and video might be this, or theatrical. And we believe that that is a conversation they've never been able to have before. Everyone's just pulling numbers out of their head, but now both parties, the buyer and the seller, can look at some common terms and try to wrap their heads around why that might be the case. And it sounds like you're doing that already on your own in your own business. You're educating your buyer so that they can feel good about their decision.
Yeah, and well, look, I think every end user wants original content. Right? So one of the most important trips I took this year was to Bentonville, Arkansas, right? Because we know what's out there. And I met the Walmart buyers, and I was part of this film festival, and I met the Voodoo buyer, and they're excited because they can hear about things early. I'm excited because now I have that direct relationship where I can empower my clients with information, like where can we get this into Walmart? And so it's become that competitive, but I think that's specific, and I think that's why everything's so challenging. There's a plethora of content out there. There's a finite amount of distribution channels, and there's a finite amount of money that consumers have to spend on entertainment. And so all this, I think, becomes very important in terms of not only the sales cycle, but then obviously going back to the original question, right? So like originality, that's where that becomes the most important component of it. But then even, as Daniel pointed out, even once that film is made, sometimes it's hard to jump on that bandwagon. We still need somebody else to prove, to prove the value.
What is your screening process? I mean, so Daniel's mentioned, we're evaluating 1,000 projects a year. What is your first filter that you apply to whittle that from 1,000 down to potentially 100?
I would say we always look who brings or sends the script in. So it should be then either sometimes it's the director or it's a producer with a script, and then we start from there. So we were also had in the past submissions where we only got submitted a script and looked at it, and there were no attachments to it at all. And then we said like, all right, okay, we really like it, because sometimes agencies also send in you sometimes also pure spec scripts where there are no attachments. It's rare, but it also happens. And then from our side, it's about that we then look at the process. Okay, who could fit to that project? So what kind of directors do we like? We know from the past. Do we want to produce by ourselves, or do we know producers that could fit to the project? So for us, it really starts with the script first, and then I would say either there may be already some elements attached, or we then start to build the team around that. So I think that's where the approach is maybe a little bit different. Not too much, but a little bit.
So as we've just heard, the industry really only wants to find either great material or great material from people that they know already, trusted sources. The problem is you can't know everyone. Chances are you're going to miss out from somebody you didn't know yet that has the next great project. Maybe it is the next Whiplash. And so that means you have to trust a very brittle system of people that you know who give you the information on the project at the right time and the right place. And this is why we've worked so hard with our scoring system to allow thousands of projects worldwide to be scored so you don't miss a single one. And if a project comes that has a very high script score, even if it doesn't come from somebody you know, at least you know it's something you need to pay attention to, because it has created a little bit of signal in this noise of thousands of different pieces of material that are out there. You don't want to miss the next Whiplash. And as much as people now say they want to be in business with the next Damien Chazelle and find the next Whiplash, the reality is they're still too scared once they are facing this potential next Damien Chazelle and Whiplash. They're still too scared. So they're looking for other indicators. And what you need to become is an expert at recognizing the patterns, looking for the signals in the noise, and trusting that. So we'll be talking a little bit more about that in the next segment as well. And until then, I want to remind you to send us your video questions. Post them on your social media, add the Filmonomics hashtag, and we'll do our best as usual to respond to them and in the follow-on segments. So thanks for tuning in. See you for the next segment. Don't forget to subscribe. Over and out.